got banned from Twitter. You're obviously back on there.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good follow if people want to check it out. I feel like you're one of like
Thanks.
the because I was living in Canada when all this stuff started really percolating with like the what was it, the Bill C-16
16.
or whatever.
Yeah.
That was the one where Jordan Peterson became famous from that with the compelled speech.
Yeah. So
And
me and Jordan Peterson testified against that bill in 2017, which was Canada's gender identity legislation.
okay, and it passed.
It did pass. There wasn't any chance of it not passing. I just wanted there to be a record that somebody pushed back, and particularly somebody who pushed back on the basis that it would nullify women's rights, which of course it did.
It has, yes. And what was like at the time when you were? I imagine you had to kind of like you were sticking your neck out to do that. Like I imagine you probably a lot of your friends are like, "What are you doing?" Like we're a lot of the people were like, "What are you talking about? Like this is a good thing."
Yeah. Yeah, it was hell. I went through hell in Vancouver when I started pushing back against this, but I mean, I'm not gonna back down just because people want me to shut up or because they want to be cowardly or because they're idiots. Frankly, a lot of those people are stupid people. But I mean, if you actually believe that a man can be a woman, or if you're going to argue that a man should be able to access a girl's change room or compete against girls in sports, you're a fucking idiot. You're stupid. That's a stupid argument.
Sure.
But yeah, like I mean, I lost so many friends. You know, I essentially lost my job at the time, although I resigned. But you know, my coworkers had completely stopped speaking to me, and
this is all due to the bill C-16.
My pushback against primarily, I mean, you know, like I said, I was controversial before that. So there were cancel campaigns. There was a massive cancel campaign against me in 2015 across Canada, started by Canadian leftists and people who I guess would call them sex work advocates because I was opposed to the legalization of prostitution. But you know, these people I was saying things that they didn't want me to say. I was never in line with leftist ideology, never mind feminist ideology, and they just wanted me to shut up. And so they've been after me in any way possible. And then it was especially, though, of course, when I started speaking out against the gender identity stuff in Vancouver, because that made, you know, maybe some people believe very strongly that men should be able to identify as women if they want to. But I think a lot of those people really just want to fit in and they don't want things to be difficult for them. Yeah. And they found it very difficult for them to be friends with me when their friends were telling them that I was like this horrible transphobe. So they're like, okay, well, I can't hang out with you anymore because this is really uncomfortable for me, you know, like in my yuppie life. Sure. And and that kind of stuff is hard, but at the end of the day, it's good because you don't want those people around you anyway.
Yeah. What year exactly did that, like all this kind of stuff start happening?
Well, I started writing about, tentatively at first. I mean, I've been sort of covering this issue since like 2012. But I think the gender identity stuff really took hold in 2016.
See, I have this theory that all of this stuff is all related to Trump becoming president because he became president and there was such a massive opposition to anything that he, like basically any opinion he had, anything he thought. So then everybody's like, whatever he would think on this, we're doing the opposite of him and as hardcore opposite as possible. Because everything seemed pretty normal up until that point. Like specifically, and like that shouldn't have affected stuff in Canada.
No, but Canadians love to pretend that their politics and lives are the same as American politics.
Right. I mean, obviously there's
they're bored of themselves.
There, but like it just was literally just this crazy pushback to just the fact that like he was the president, everybody's like, and he was a conservative, so he was like, we're gonna go as far left as possible just to like
I think that you're right that the kind of divide between left and right really solidified and things became extremely, extremely divisive at that point. And you're right, people did exactly that. Whatever Trump says, I'm against, even if it makes sense, even if it's good policy, even if maybe I would have believed that 5 years ago and supported it, or certainly, like I would have supported it if like Hillary said it or if Obama said it.
Sure.
But it was all happening before that. And it was funny because it all kind of happened at once. across Canada, across the US, in places like Australia, in the UK, and it became institutionalized. So, like, essentially, what happened was that organizations, their funding became dependent on the adoption of gender identity ideology. And if, you know, for example, like what would have once been like a lesbian, gay, bi, like LGBT charity or something like that, an NGO, they wouldn't be able to get funding anymore unless they started pumping the trans thing. So that kind of thing happened. That also happened to women's shelters and transition houses. And certainly it happened within universities where this gender theory, it's all bunk, like this Judith Butler gender theory where, you know, like maybe we're all fluid and who even knows what a woman really is. Maybe this is all just a performance, in which case you can perform masculinity and maybe that means you're a man.
So
it's
like
just
nothing's real, basically. Nothing
essays.
has a definition. Nothing's real.
Well, yeah, right.
Essentially. And so what got you kicked off of Twitter?
I was referring to a man as he. And it was this guy, you probably remember this story, Jonathan Yaniv.
Yeah.
Who, that was
the wax the balls.
Yeah, I mean, he was, you know, essentially a crazy person and a predator.
Yeah.
And he was going around to these female estheticians. He was contacting them, I think, mostly on Facebook. And they were estheticians who worked independently. You know, like a lot of them were working out of their homes. A lot of them are immigrants, English as a second language, etc. So women who would be vulnerable in this particular way. And he would contact them and ask them for a Brazilian bikini wax. And when they realized that he was male, because he looks male, he doesn't, you know, at that time, he was not even trying to look female. And even on various places on the internet and social media, he was still identifying as he, and then she in some places, and then, you know, she, he in some places. They would realize that he was male and say, I'm sorry, we don't perform this service for men. And then he would try to extort money out of them. This was his grift, right? It was just, you know, he was trying to get money out of people. You know, like, I'm going to take you to court and sue you for transphobia, pay me. I think some of them did, in fact, pay him, but the ones that he didn't, he dragged through this human rights tribunal.
Yeah.
So they were, of course, reporting on
this whole human rights tribunal system where you can just kind of like take, I don't know if you know that guy, Mike Ward, but he's a comedian and he had to go to the human rights tribunal over a joke. And I
think I heard about
and they like charged him or they found him guilty and he had to pay like $40,000. But then he told them to go.
Did he?
Well, he said no, and then he ended up taking it to the Supreme Court. He was on my other show, and he went to the Supreme Court of Canada, and he had to basically explain why his joke was just a joke. But he spent $250,000 on legal fees in order to get to the Supreme Court. But then he won finally. But he's pretty rich just because he's like the biggest French comedian, so he's just like whatever. But it's the whole thing. But yeah, so Jessica Yaniv, that's what started. You called Jessica Yaniv a man.
Yeah, I referred to him as he on Twitter, and then I was permanently banned. So I was off Twitter for 4 years until Elon took over and brought me back.